when we can pause and learn to take better care of ourselves, then we actually are going to be a better parent. We're going to be a better spouse. We're going to be better for our patients or our siblings. We're just going to be an overall better, we're going to have better relationships, and we're going to have more energy and better moods when we do those things to take care of ourselves. And it was a hard lesson to learn. It's been a slow process, but now I can completely relate things like if I have a grumpy month, I can look back at my Calm meditation app and I know I will have less than 20 meditations for the prior month. It's happened twice to me.
Wow.
And I go, what is going on? Where's my Calm? And I look back and I say, oh, you didn't put the time in with your meditation, so you're not going to have the outcome.
Welcome to the Meaningful Revolution podcast, where we talk about people's passions and hope to inspire you to your own. We also answer the question, what if you could just add 1% more meaning to your life every day for the next year? So join us on this Meaningful Revolution. I'm your host, Sean Butner, certified high performance coach, and we have a really great episode for you today, so let's get into it. Erin regularly leads breakthrough wellness workshops, retreats, and coaching programs for physicians, nurse practitioners, physicians' assistants, and other clinicians to help them create and maintain balance, enhance their health, happiness, performance, and thrive personally and professionally. With that said, Erin, welcome to the Meaningful Revolution. I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you, Sean, and it's such a great honor to be here. And I just wanted to pause and just say that the way we connected a year ago, the way we became friends, was actually great a great example of the person that you are and why I so appreciate connecting with you. And we were on a coach's call, and I desperately needed some help with my website because I was having a workshop in just a few days. My first one ever, was struggling with my website, asked for help, and Sean's like, I'm your guy. And, the kindness of a relative stranger at the time. And since then, I've been interacting with other people who are also friends with Sean, and they've had similar acts of kindness and just have such great things to say about your big serving heart. And so it's just really a great honor and pleasure to be able to spend this time with you. Thanks again for having me.
Oh, of course, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you more over this past year. And thank you so much for those kind words. It's um,
Mhm.
always kind of catches me off guard. It's very touching, so I appreciate it. So, any case,
Yeah.
today we're going to be talking about self-care and something that you know quite a bit about. Can you maybe start off with the definition of what self-care is, and maybe in the context of being a physician, especially after a very crazy, like 3+ years with COVID and all the
Mhm.
things that have happened in health?
Yeah, so, as a physician and healthcare provider, and also as a parent, oftentimes I feel self care is a foreign topic with people like me. And I know that I didn't learn to do much self care for myself until 20 years into my medical career, when I started working with a high performance coach myself. And that's when I learned to start setting boundaries and prioritizing myself, not always prioritizing my family or my patients above the needs of my own. And I think that it's very common, kind of instilled in us all the way back from medical school, when we start doing, when we're studying 16, 18 hours a day, and then we get into clinical rotations and we're on overnight call, and you're given a list of things to do, whether it's learning in the classroom or patient care and notes to take care of. And your instructions are to get it done no matter what the cost. And so then you move into residency and you have even more clinical responsibilities. The hours get even longer, the call days get more frequent. And at no time, once you finish your training and you go into your own practice, does anybody say, okay, now it's time, go ahead and start taking care of yourself. Now's the time to get good sleep, to exercise, to eat healthier. And so you're so used to being on this adrenaline soaked existence, always doing and rarely just being, and not prioritizing healthy things like exercise and sleep. And yet it takes a toll. And so for
Mhm.
myself, 20 years into my medical career, I actually was diagnosed with cancer. And I'm sure that that had something to do with the stress and lack of self care that had been going on in my life for over 20 years, since I had started studying medicine. And I think as a parent and a physician, then you're putting your kids first. And then when does that self-care come into play? And yet, when we can pause and learn to take better care of ourselves, then we actually are going to be a better parent. We're going to be a better spouse. We're going to be better for our patients or our siblings. We're just going to be an overall better, we're going to have better relationships, and we're going to have more energy and better moods when we do those things to take care of ourselves. And it was a hard lesson to learn. It's been a slow process, but now I can completely relate things like if I have a grumpy month, I can look back at my Calm meditation app and I know I will have less than 20 meditations for the prior month. It's happened twice to me. And I go, what is going on? Where's my Calm? And I look back and I was like, oh, you didn't put the time in with your meditation, so you're not going to have the outcome.
If you're enjoying listening to this episode of the Meaningful Revolution podcast, there's another kind of conversation that you might really enjoy. So check out Dara here explaining a little bit about high performance coaching.
I feel like in this particular moment where all of us need massive amounts of self-care, high performance coaching is one of those huge gifts you could give to yourself for self-care. It's one of those things that just shapes your life in all these ways you never imagined. And I think I would just tell a friend that it's worth it. And get ready, because it's going to shake up your life. Like, it almost feels like, you know, you don't even realize as you're going along kind of these progressive steps, and all of a sudden, you know, 12 sessions in or however many sessions in, you're like, wait a minute, I'm planning and thinking about a life that is, you know, drastically different in many ways. And so it's almost like this mental shaking up and getting all the crap out of your head. So I think it's an amazing experience, and it's incredibly energizing, and it's worth every penny.
Awesome. I love having deep conversations with folks, whether they're in my podcast or in my coaching practice. And so if you'd like to have your meaningful revolution started through a conversation and high performance, please stay tuned to the end of this episode for your invitation on how to get started.
And so there's a direct cause and effect that I can see in my own life when I don't do my own self-care. Same thing with lack of proper sleep or exercise. So knowing that I was going to be a guest here today and wanting to be on my A game, as soon as my husband got home from his 24-hour shift today, we had our coffee and I said, let's go out for a jog. I know that's going to get my brain in the right place. It's going to boost my energy and allow me to be a better version of myself than not doing those things. And when we learn to prioritize that self-care, just as much as we prioritize our parenting or getting reports done for people in my career, then we realize we're going to have better outcomes.
Right on. And I love this connection into, you know, having that space to take, you know, we talk about it a lot in high performance that, you know, your productive times are just as important as the times where you're rejuvenating, you're reflecting, you're able to have that perspective on what's going on and what's helpful to you, and then not burn out, which is damaging your health and relationships along the way. And as someone that had been in, you know, tech culture for a while and doing software, not a profession that's also known for really taking care of themselves. But I know that for me, like when you use your brain to solve problems like code, or when you need to access medical knowledge to properly, you know, diagnose or treat someone, you want to be on the top of your game. So first off, I wanted to ask you, like, how, as a doctor, I've always wanted to ask a doctor this, and every time I see my doctor, he's like, okay, you know, check this, do, and then out. But It always struck me as ironic or kind of funny that the people that are supposed to be in charge of our health are often not able to take care of their own. Like, could you maybe
Right.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Um,
So I think that medicine has changed a lot, and so it's kind of like frogs in a pot of water, and the
mm,
heat just gets cranked up a little more, a little more, a little more. So when I started practicing medicine 25 years ago, I actually joined a group of pediatricians who had been practicing together for 22 years, all five of them,
wow.
and they did things like they went camping together, they socialized. We had holiday parties. We were friends and we were colleagues. And there was an ebb and flow. And so in pediatrics, it used to be in the summertime, you might see 8, 10 patients a day because everybody was healthy and there wasn't a lot going on. You saw some checkups and things. And then things got busier in the winter during the illness months. And then
Hmm.
things slowed down again, but there was this ebb and flow so that you would be running full speed ahead in the winter and then you had time to recharge, time to connect. And then the temperature in medicine kept heating up a little bit, so cutting down on payment, increasing the expectations on documentation. HIPAA came along, so all of these things, then the electronic health record. And there's some good things to all of those, and yet each of them adds another burden. Somebody used to be in the hospital for 2 weeks. Now they might be hospitalized for 2 days for the same problem. So
Hmm.
you think about the turnover and the churn, and now you got to learn 5 times as many patients in that same period of time and document 10 times as long. So that heat has continued to ratchet up. And that's just in my 25-year career,
Hmm.
not going back much further than that. But then it's hard to recognize, oh, wait, we need to change something because the heat just kept going and now the pot is boiling. And so everybody's already fried and burnt out. And now you have a pandemic come along to
Right.
add even more fuel to that fire that you're in that boiling pot. So it's complicated, and we are not taught to care for ourselves. We're taught
Hmm.
to be doers. And so
Hmm.
for learning to just be, to relax, to take a nap, to take a few minutes of quiet time. We're so used to doing, and again, running on adrenaline and caffeine and unhealthy foods to keep going. And then you just crash.
Yeah.
And then you get enough energy to just start it all over again. So one of my passions is helping the individual, physicians, healthcare providers, parents, um, learn to change the things that they have control over. But one of my bigger missions that I would love to do is positively impact the culture of medicine so that it is not something we would regret if our own children entered the field of medicine, because it's so rewarding and yet very damaging to relationships and health, especially for women in medicine. And as more and more women enter medicine and we practice differently than the men, we have
Hmm.
our own set of challenges. And so then how does that affect our parenting and our ability to be a mom and a physician when the culture was created by male counterparts who do medicine differently? So it's a really complicated um, place to be, and we have to shift mindsets and get out of
Yeah.
closed Western medicine thinking mindsets. And for me, when I shifted my focus from general pediatrics to child abuse medicine, and I got a real better understanding of trauma and what it does to us. So not just for children who are being abused, but also for the healthcare providers who are in traumatic situations during their career. And you're expected, maybe you've got a traumatic situation going on in your own life, but you've got surgery to do, or you've got a patient who's coding, and you have to shelf the things that are going on in your own life. And at some point, we have to deal with those things.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. And my hope is we can start doing a better job and digging into our own selves. And that's one of the things I love about being a coach and learning about that, thinking more philosophically, not just science minded. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so important. So I had a former client in my coaching practice who was in the education system and worked at with more at need populations.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the stories she would have of like Oh yeah, I saw a kid, and they just said they saw their best friend shot in front of their house yesterday after
Yeah.
school, and the trauma that I felt
Hmm.
listening, like, this is a terrible thing, and I wasn't even like remotely involved. It's just a very intense situation, like I imagine medicine is.
Hmm. That secondary trauma.
Yeah,
Hmm.
how do deal with that? She actually ended up starting an organization to work with schools on trauma informed care, which is treating the organization as a system, and that, like, not
Hmm.
only is the student the one that experiences the trauma, but it's all the caretakers, all the teachers, all the faculty around them, and how do you help manage them through. So I just had that kind of connection where it sounded maybe a similar thing to you. But
Yeah.
um I'm curious then, like, why? I mean, maybe we already covered this, but why is why do you feel it's so important to change this culture in medicine, right? So
Hmm.
you mentioned that it was built by people who practice medicine a bit differently,
Hmm.
mainly men, which is
Right.
hard to say. Um, and the changing things with HIPAA and all the electronic records. So the
Hmm.
administration's kind of ramped up with maybe you
Hmm.
still the same amount of doctor hours, just maybe more being taken up by that or pushing into personal life. But
Well, and there's
what?
also a big thing I didn't mention is loss of autonomy. And
Oh,
so
okay.
back, 20, 30 years ago, many medical practices were self-owned. So the
Mhm.
physicians were their employer. And now there's been a huge shift over, especially in the last few years, where hospitals and other big organizations are buying up practices. And so when I first started practicing medicine 25 years ago, and we were self employed, so about 25 physicians, different practices. And so there were surgeons and OBGYNs and pediatricians and internists, and everybody earned a different salary based on their productivity. And everybody contributed to the cost of the buildings and things. But if you chose to be a lower producer and you went at a slower pace, which is what I did, then I was going to take home less, and that was my choice. But one of the other things that's happening is that they're taking, all of the square and round and triangular pegs and trying to fit them into the same shape, whether you practice medicine one way or another. And so there's this um, productivity churn requirement for physicians who are now employed physicians instead of self-employed. So that autonomy is gone. And as we know, being coaches, when you are disempowered, you feel like nothing you do is going to make a difference. You get into that victim mode. You feel trapped. And then you just kind of like give up and you're like, why bother? And so, again, the coaching and trying to make a movement and a raised awareness that no, we really do have some choices. We can set boundaries. If you have sick time, you should be able to take that sick time, even if you're understaffed,
Right.
right? Because then otherwise you're enabling the organization
Mhm.
to not, credit you with the time that you deserve. And so many people just feel trapped by their circumstances. And because they are servants and they want to help their patients, they feel like if I say no, if I set a boundary, my patient is going to suffer and they don't deserve that. So they would choose for their own selves to suffer. And they're just
Mhm.
going to put in that extra time, whether it's reimbursed or not, because they don't want their patients to suffer. And my hope is that we can say, yes, we need to do great patient care. And at the same time, we need to not do such self sacrificing while doing it. And everybody's going to benefit because then you might be able to practice medicine 20, 30, 40 years instead of feeling burnt out after 5 or 10, which is so
Right.
common now. Yeah. And it's not specific for healthcare, as you're saying, in your former industry and teachers, the themes are common. And so I think that as we raise awareness in more and more groups and language becomes more common, and we don't just talk about self-care, but we model it and we
Mhm.
encourage it to be, in my office now, it's common if we've got a break in patient care, we'll go for a walk outside and nobody's going to criticize us. Nobody's going to be sitting at their desk going, why aren't they chained to their desk working?
Right.
So there's been a culture shift. so that we celebrate when somebody takes a vacation or takes some needed time off instead of grumbling about it and making them feel guilty about it. So it is
Yeah,
possible.
that's so powerful. I think a couple of weeks ago, by the time that this podcast is released, I was talking with Carrie Petrie. If you, she's in our one of our coaching groups
Uh-huh.
together. She was talking about wellness and functional medicine. She came from law and
Mhm.
really talked about how changing culture could be really painful in that she was able to come up with a here's how to do a wellness thing in my banking organization for free, just leveraging people that were really wanted to model or had expertise there, and that
Mhm.
being super super um hard to do and hard to move. So I know that it's a huge feat,
Yeah.
and I want to just honor you for recognizing it and then wanting to help
Mhm.
change it.
Yeah. And it's the other thing, I think it's very slow. I actually remember being at a live training with Brendan Burchard, and I raised my hand and he called on me. And I felt like I was one of the only people in my organization that had a growth mindset, that was learning and wanting to move and change things. And I was like, what do you do when you're all alone? When you feel like nobody else is on the same page? He's like, buy him one of my books, bring him to one of my conferences, right? And so, with that patience, that being okay with slow, it's not going to change overnight. So over the course of 4 years working with my CEO, working with my other colleagues, by the time I stepped down from my medical director position, there was a palpable change to the culture. And
Mm.
I felt good because other people kind of recognized, hey, this is here because of you. You helped start this. And the CEO, who also had a growth mindset, and we would do things like talk about Brene Brown during supervisory meetings and things, which wasn't the norm when I started 10 years ago. But being patient and then seeing things develop on their own timeline has been very rewarding. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very exciting to hear, from
Mhm.
someone that kind of looks at a lot of medical stuff from the outside. It to me just seems a lot like a mess, and
Mhm.
probably is probably really messy depending on where you are and which organization, that whole thing. But okay, to maybe switch gears a little bit, I'm wondering, how did you get started on the path of becoming a doctor and then a pediatrician, and then this uh, what a self care coach?
Mhm. So, I have an older brother, and I really looked up to him. We were the middle children in our family of 4, and, he wanted to be a veterinarian probably when I was, like, 2nd or 3rd grade, and so because he wanted to be a veterinarian, I wanted to be a veterinarian. We had horses and animals. We lived out in the country, and so that was my goal until I hit college. And I've always had a love of children, and I babysat and taught swimming and taught gymnastics and lifeguarded and did lots of things with kids. And so my freshman year of college, I realized that there's lots of people who can work with animals, but I also am really good with people. And so
Mm,
I decided to make a shift and um, decided that I wanted to apply to medical school instead of veterinary school, and then had, kind of had my sights on pediatrics from the beginning, knowing that that was the population that I really enjoyed working with. Yeah.
uh,
And then, but I don't come from a family of medical people. I come from, attorneys and teachers and folks, but not any physicians. So I was lucky and had a mentor. My sister's boyfriend was in medical school when I was an undergrad, and so he acted as my mentor and helping guide me and helping me figure out how to get into medical school and different strategies, which was really a great gift
oh wow.
that I received. Yeah. So because well, the undergrad that I went to actually had this fast track program where you did a 3 years. It was UC Riverside. So you started out as an undergrad, and the top 24 in your class, that pre-med class, would go straight into medical school. So their 4th year as an undergrad was actually their first year of medical school classes
Oh
through
cool.
UCLA. So it was all the people that spent all their time in the library, didn't have any outside interests, and I joined a new sorority. I was in leadership in the sorority. I was on the ski team. I enjoyed hanging out with friends. I didn't spend all my time in the library. So actually, when I met with the pre-med advisor at my undergrad, she told me not to apply to medical school.
Oh,
Like basically,
wow.
they don't want people like you. You're not a straight A student. And
Mm.
so for me, I had to make a choice. Am I going to listen to this person who doesn't believe in me? Or am I going to challenge that no from the person who's supposed to be guiding me and giving me advice to help me get into medical school? And so
Mhm.
I chose not to meet with her anymore. And happenstance, my sister was dating a person in medical school. He lived about an hour away, and he became my pre-med advisor. He wasn't a straight A student either. We were very similar in our studies and interests and more pretty well rounded. And now I think that's looked at more for people, candidates applying to medical school. But back 25, 30 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. So that was a really powerful shift where I didn't take no for an answer. And I looked for somebody who was going to support me in my dream and
Mhm.
say, no, really, I can do this, and listen to his advice and successfully, obviously, made it into medical school. Yeah.
That is so powerful. And I hope everyone that was listening kind of picked up that, there will be times in your life where the authorities or someone you look up to will not be supportive, but there's so many people that will support you. And there's so many ways if you really want something to go out and get it. And I think that's such a powerful, simple lesson from your story that I hope people take away from it, because I think that's such a powerful thing to not get stuck in how things really are. And it actually probably, and maybe you have a thought on this, but has that experience maybe trickled into wanting to change the culture in medicine as kind of like a
Hmm.
bigger thing? Like, no, it doesn't have to be this way. We can
Yeah.
change this.
Yeah. And I think that I had a very unique experience as a late teen, early 20-year-old. My mom remarried, and she married an airline pilot. And along with his employee benefits included discounted passes. So we could travel almost anywhere in the world for like $25. So we took advantage of that a
Wow.
lot, but we never had a guaranteed seat. And
Hmm.
so we would show up and we may or may not get on that airplane. And sometimes it would create days of delays or we'd have to problem solve. But it really gave me, I had people say, this flight is oversold by 170 seats. Like, don't bother, find a different flight. And I learned, nope, I'm going to stay right here till that plane takes off. And there were times where I got on that oversold flight. And there were times where they said, no, it's too late. You can't check in for this international flight. You were supposed to be here 3 hours ago. And it's like, well, there
Hmm.
was a strike with the public transportation, and that kind of put a wrench in things. And so then they told me no. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to go find another employee, and I'm going to find a way to get
Hmm.
around that. And so it just really helped me fine tune my problem solving and realize I don't have to take my at first no. I can handle rejection
Yeah.
and then problem solve and say, do I really need to listen to that advice? And being really choosy about who I want to listen to advice. And one of the reasons I appreciate connecting with you and our group of coaches is that we're a special group of people that
Mhm.
are there to support each other, that we know paying something forward, we're going to get, you know, multiple fold back in what we give out to the world, right? And so
Mhm.
it's a unique community. And so I choose who I want to be in my community. I'm very selective, and for somebody, I mean, if they're in your family, you don't necessarily get those choices, right? But
Right.
really being selective of having friends that are going to help me grow and help boost me and help cheer me on when I'm getting ready to do things that are uncomfortable or out of my comfort zone. And so I think that I try to also encourage others to be really selective of who are you spending your time with? Are these friends relevant to where you're at in your life? Or can you honor them in a different way than spending time when they're, maybe choosing to be negative or sucking the rest of your energy out? Yeah.
Uh, right on. Like, as a self-identified introvert and someone that can have their energy drained by interacting with people,
Mhm.
I definitely identify with, picking people to build really strong bonds and relationships with, like yourself, and all the other great folks in our merry little crew. Um,
Mhm.
so and that works for some people too. Some people like I know my wife is very much like know all the people kind of person, and
Mhm.
you know, hug puppies, kiss babies type, personality, really wanting to, connect with folks.
Mhm.
Um, but it is the quality of the people around you is such an important thing for your success, and for your outlook, um,
And for your
talk
self-care. When
self-care.
you
Yeah.
think of, and I think that I was challenging a coaching client the other day just on the energy that gets drained in interactions with other human beings. And so we have to pay attention to the emotional drain, right?
Yeah.
Not just the physical drain. And when we find every time I'm with this person, my energy just goes away
Mm.
because they steal all that energy, then we have to be careful about that. And
Yeah.
if we want to fix that situation or whatever, right, there may be some limits to that, but paying attention to how people either fuel you up and make you feel more alive and vibrant, or they make you feel negative or drained. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Um, Switching gears a little bit then, as you've pursued this life of service in medicine and then self-care, um, have you had a couple of opportunities or things that have really opened up because of your work and being more aware and coaching more people to take care of themselves, put
Hmm.
the oxygen mask on before helping others, type mentality?
Hmm.
Anything come to mind that's really maybe surprised you or really kind of drives home the point on how important self-care is?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest revelations that I had was that the things that I thought were me problems, overcommitting, running behind, then as I coached more and more women in medicine who were also mostly parents, I realized it wasn't an Erin problem. It's a very widespread problem. And so, how can I then, if I can help myself overcome things? So, I became trained in helping people use the full focus planner because I needed more help strengthening how I focused and narrowed my focus and didn't overcommit. And my clients needed help with that. So I was like, okay, I can't help them any better than I know how to do it myself. And so seeing the trends that, again, it's not a me thing. So many of the things I struggled with, and I blame myself and really beat myself up for, whether it was the way I was parenting, whether it was the way I was getting along with my spouse, whether it was the energy I had at the end of my workday, all of those things, just beating myself up about. And then I meet with these other women, and they're just like I am. We have so many similar issues that we're dealing with. And so the good news is that since it's not unique to me, if I've found ways to successfully shift out of that situation and learn successful problem solving, then I can
Mhm.
help other individuals do the same. And so that, and then also give them hope that they see me as being in a different place in my life than I was 5 years ago. And I think it also gives them hope that there's possibilities for myself too, even if you've been stuck in the same rut for 20 years.
Right. Oh, yeah. It's so important for people to know that they're not alone in this.
Hmm.
That we all again, I like to point out that we're all human beings with feelings, with social needs, with the need to move our bodies and breathe and live our lives. And
Hmm.
sometimes in a lot of, especially in the US, I think with corporate culture, it can really grind you down to just be a cog in the machine, which is nobody like aspires to be the greatest cog.
Hmm.
You want to be a little bit more than, I mean, you want to do really great work. You want to be known for your work. You want to take pride in the things that you do for work, but you also want to see your family grow up and
Hmm.
all the other things that make life fun and rich and worthwhile. So next question that popped in my head is
So I'm gonna
on.
I'm gonna just can
Oh,
I
go
buddy up
ahead.
from you use that
Yeah, yeah.
term cog in a wheel, and it's very similar to one of the terms I use is like we're not robots, right?
Mhm.
And so I think many times people who are in really busy fields, not just physicians or healthcare providers, but we just expect so much out of ourselves. And no matter what's going on at home, no matter what's going on in the office place, like we are not robots. We have feelings. And when I hear, it's painful to hear some of the things that people choose to do. They just heard their father died in between patients, and then they just go right into the next patient room, right? For myself, I remember, oh, it's been almost 20 years, and my husband's a firefighter. And I had called him, let him know there was a fire. It was his day off. He went in to go help, and then we heard that there were some fatalities. And I was at the office, and I didn't know if he was one of them. I know everybody at the fire department. It was a very small place,
Mhm.
and the physician in me thinks, oh, I have to keep seeing my patients, that my day's not over yet. And then it's
Mhm.
like, how am I supposed to do that? Right? I'm a human
Yeah.
being, and I don't know if my husband's still alive or not. And he ended up being okay, but we lost three of our friends that day. And so, and hearing other people who turn on that robot mode and say, no, 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 I'm just going to push through. How painful is that when we can't just say, you know what, I need a pause.
If you're enjoying listening to this episode of the Meaningful Revolution podcast, there's another kind of conversation that you might really enjoy. So check out Dara here explaining a little bit about high performance coaching.
I feel like in this particular moment where all of us need massive amounts of self-care, high performance coaching is one of those huge gifts you could give to yourself for self-care. It's one of those things that just shapes your life in all these ways you never imagined. And I think I would just tell a friend that it's worth it. And get ready because it's going to shake up your life. Like, it almost feels like, you don't even realize as you're going along kind of these progressive steps, and all of a sudden, 12 sessions in or however many sessions in, you're like, wait a minute, I'm planning and thinking about a life that is, drastically different in many ways. And so it's almost like this mental shaking up and getting all the crap out of your head. So I think it's an amazing experience, and it's incredibly energizing, and it's worth every penny.
Awesome. I love having deep conversations with folks, whether they're in my podcast or in my coaching practice. And so if you'd like to have your meaningful revolution started through a conversation and high performance, please stay tuned to the end of this episode for your invitation on how to get started. Yeah.
Or asking for help and allowing somebody else to step in for us so we can take care of ourselves and giving ourselves permission for that.
Absolutely. And on that, I've always had this thought too, where I think most patients or most people, just to show a little bit of empathy for this type of thing here, if you had a choice, if you had to go in for surgery, routine, not routine, and you had a choice
Mhm.
between doctors of someone who just was able to sleep 12 hours, had a big breakfast, spent time with their family, is now rolling into the office, getting ready to do their thing that, it's surgery, versus a doctor who's been up for 36 hours straight,
Mhm.
is super stressed, maybe like forgot to eat the whole time,
Mhm.
and then found a personal tragedy like a family member passed away or is injured. Like, who do you think is going to give out of those two fictional doctors the
Yeah.
best care? It's going to be the person that is in a way better headspace, that has slept. If
Mhm.
anything goes wrong, I want the person that's really sharp and rested and relaxed to,
Yeah.
be the one to be like, oh no, but this is what we got to do to, save the day or save the patient or whatnot.
Yeah.
I think it's really putting a lot of our healthcare outcomes at risk when we push the medical staff and the people that provide medical care to us to their limits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And it's not just, I think the chronicity, right? You can handle something for a very short period of time, but it's like doing, I talk about the doing the sprint pace for a marathon length of
yeah,
time. And that's not possible because you're gonna bonk, right? You're gonna
yeah.
you're gonna run out of gas and you're gonna have to stop.
Hmm.
And so that's something where as a physician, we can run a sprint's pace for a while and then we have to recharge and regroup. Yeah, take a break.
Right.
Yeah.
So with people that might be in an intense work culture, I've
Mhm.
experienced this in tech, and we're not, lives generally don't depend on us, or at least in my career, it's been retail stuff or,
Mhm.
stuff that people enjoy. It's not life or death. But if you find yourself feeling trapped or feeling cornered or feeling hopeless about what you can do, um, what have you maybe experienced yourself where you've been in that mode? Like, what's the challenge there, and what's the big, like, maybe number one thing that really helps people in that
Mhm.
zone? If you're in any of the fields we talked about, education,
Yeah.
law, medicine, engineering.
Yeah.
um,
I think the first step is awareness. So just
okay.
like if a person's been depressed their whole life and they don't know what it feels like to not feel depressed, how are they going to know? Or like you see the videos with the kids when they get the hearing turned on with their cochlear
Mhm,
implants for the first time. And it's like, whoa, there's this new sensation. I've never felt that before. So if you don't know what it feels like not to feel stuck, not to feel exhausted, not to feel overwhelmed,
mhm,
then the first thing is building awareness. And usually that comes maybe from an outside source. Again, for me, it was having a coach teaching me, yes, boundaries are healthy. They're not a sign of weakness. Oh,
mhm,
that was a new idea, right? So somebody to challenge old beliefs. And then that awareness becomes even more heightened when you can have a different outcome that week because you made different choices, right? So we all have things we have control over and we make big and little choices every day,
mhm,
and then as we continue to make different choices and we get different outcomes, even if it's a tiny little choice, I'm going to sleep 10 more minutes a night. I had one client who that's all she did. I'm going to commit to 10 to 15 more minutes of sleep a night. And guess
mhm,
what? After a few weeks, her energy is boosted. She didn't go to the gym. She didn't change the way she was eating. She did one tiny little thing. And it's kind of like little increments of change, and you keep moving forward, and then you're going to end up in an entirely different direction than you started out at. But if you're not aware that there's a problem with how you're doing things, or maybe for me, even the family members, my sisters and my mom all worked the same as I did, even though they weren't healthcare providers. So all of the
mhm,
role models, my peers, everybody was doing the same thing. So I didn't see that there was a different way. And I was one of the people who started doing it differently first out of the people that I interacted with. And so, but then you experience something different and then you have a real awareness and you're like, oh, so now for my own self, I have such awareness and I like where I'm at now so much better than I was at for the first 20 years of my career. When I start feeling shifts and I get back going back to that direction, I have
mhm,
to course correct much, I course correct much more quickly now because I'm aware. Nope, I like where I'm at better than where I was before. So raising awareness is the first piece. And once we have an awareness that there's a different way of being,
mhm,
then getting those people who are going to cheerlead you. So many of the things, signing up for a coach, I was berated by my family. They're saying, what are you doing? I didn't know what I was going to get out of it. It was one of the best decisions of my life, totally life changing. And I had zero support. I didn't know anybody who was a coach or who had been coached. I just knew that this was like the universe opening up an opportunity for me and I was supposed to take it. And
mhm.
so, again, not listening to the naysayers, the people who are like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And then who's going to cheer you on? And so that you can get to a different place and getting close to the people like you want. I want like them, right? I want more like that. Get
Mhm,
close to those people and they can mentor you and they can help pull you along so that you can get closer to where they're at.
Right. So that's so fantastic. And again, just like the law of, you are the average of your like 10 closest people of success,
Mhm,
finance, happiness, stress
mhm,
levels, all that kind of stuff. So if you're someone that had been struggling with that support of, oh, I want to change, but my coworkers are just as miserable as I am, and they don't
mhm,
want the boat to be rocked. So any change is threatening to them, so they'll try to
mhm.
stop it. Or my spouse isn't supportive, my family isn't supportive. I'm curious, how do you maybe evaluate the people around you on how to level up or to get to where you want to go? Like, how do you make that jump of like, okay, I don't like this, I
Mhm.
don't have a really good more role model for what's next, but I know there's something different.
Yeah.
How do you go and think through relationships or strategizing to
Mhm.
create that group?
Sometimes I think it's having patience and taking time. So, for example, I've gone through a big career shift over the last couple of years. I was working full time. I was the medical director of my nonprofit medical organization and put in, sometimes 60 plus hours a week,
Mhm.
and was very involved in, helping problem solve. And we were a growing organization. We'd grown from about 18 employees. Now we're 50 plus employees. We
Wow.
tripled the number of programs we were in, so we were moving and a shaking. And yet it took its toll on my energy stores and how much time that I was putting in, and I was ready for a shift. And so in early 2020, I actually lost both of my parents within 5 weeks. So not related to COVID, but it was at the beginning of COVID.
Sorry to hear
And
that.
yeah, thank you. So, and it gave me, as again, one of those signs from the universe saying, you know what? Like, if this isn't a wake up call that you can make some changes so you can be more present for your family, so you aren't always at work, it just was a big sign for me to make a change. And so, in the first few months, as I was talking to my family about, well, what if I became a coach? I'd already started doing some wellness support and a retreat for women in medicine, and everybody, my kids, my husband, my kids were like, "Are we gonna have to move out of our house? Are we gonna go bankrupt? Are we gonna be living on the street?" Like, they didn't know, how's mom gonna make money outside of medicine? That's the only thing they'd known. So the
Mhm.
first 3 to 4 months, I had to convince my own little circle, my inner family, I think I can do this differently. And then can I get your support? And so after 3 to 4 months, they finally said, okay, let's give this a try. And so then I put in my 6 months notice, and then I stepped down from my leadership position, started going part time, and I've kind of wrangled down how much I'm working in the office. And, but it was a long drawn out process. And I was ready to make that decision 3 to 4 months before my family was. But I also
Mhm.
wanted to honor their worries and concerns and make sure we had vetted through the worries and concerns, and I wasn't being like irrational or rash, making a rash decision.
Yeah.
And so I needed to make sure, and I think that's one of the big changes I've had over the last 5 years, is really being open to other people's needs, their input, and really listen,
Mhm.
make sure I'm hearing what they say. And so that this can feel like a decision we're making together as a family, right? Win or lose, it's not, I'm making this decision my way or the highway, which used to be very common in my family, which I'm not proud of.
Mhm.
And so it feels good that we made this decision together, and they're supportive of me because I didn't make that decision on my own. And then I've been able to back down in my office with, I feel like, with grace. I'm not going out in a, burning pile of ashes, right? Because I burned myself out. I'm like,
Right.
I'm ready to step back. I've given a lot. I love this organization. I love the people who work there. And so I don't want to damage it by staying too long or by not giving my best, and feel like I can serve in a different way, including to that organization through my new wellness practices. Yeah.
Oh, awesome, awesome. That's I love the idea of, because I think in personal development a lot, there's like you have to like have support or you get rid of the haters and like sometimes the haters are your family, to
Hmm.
make it a little bit more extreme, maybe than your case. I'm sure they love you and
Yeah,
all
no,
that.
that's yeah. I have a very opinionated daughter, but actually, when you can listen to the words, even of the haters, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes there's some glimmers of truth in what they're saying, and when we can listen, and I'm a second degree black belt in taekwondo, so I learned you thank people who give you correction because otherwise they don't know how to give it to you. So
Right.
I don't agree on like getting hung up on what haters have to say. And yet, if
Hmm.
somebody's telling you something, I think one of the biggest growths that I've had for my own relationships that's so powerful is the growth I've had with my daughter, who's now almost 18 or almost 19.
Mm.
And she was
Wow.
born into the wrong family. Her love language is quality time. She was born a twin to me as her
Oh.
mom, who was working all the time, a dad who works
Right.
24-hour shifts, right? She should have been born into a family who had a stay at home mom, and an only child would have been a much better fit.
Right.
And when I recognized my parenting and our lifestyle didn't meet her needs, and what can I do to better meet her needs, then our relationship began to blossom. And that's one of the things that I love about personal growth and development is I've had a couple, there's another work relationship that we were on such shaky ground, no trust. And I'm like, this person deserves better from me. What can we do? And now we have a very strong relationship and I get to cheer her on and she has learned to trust me because I learned things like boundaries can be
Mm.
healthy instead of thinking somebody's weak when they're setting healthy boundaries. So yeah, the relationship things have been my biggest gain, and
Wow.
that's one of the reasons I want to encourage others to kind of think outside the box, learn and grow new ways of thinking, right? Instead of trying to fix problems the same old way. Because my daughter and I have never been closer, and we still have our bumps in the road, but because
Mhm.
I've been willing to listen to what she has had to say, the ways I parented her that didn't meet her needs, her interpretation of events in our lives has been such a powerful gift to me,
Mhm.
not easy to hear,
Right.
and yet going to help me not make those same mistakes again. And
Yeah.
so I thank her for giving me that input when some people might take it as criticism. But how else can we grow?
100%. And what I also really love about listening, about enrolling the family in the decision making, even when maybe they weren't initially supportive of this new
Mhm,
chapter, is it's also another way to say leadership. Like you were able to, in that moment, lead the family, lead the people around you to that
mhm,
supportive network that you needed, but
mhm,
that also works for everyone. And so um I just had that kind of, I clobbed onto that, and I wanted to point that out too. That leadership in organizations or in your family or
mhm,
in your community is a lot of time listening and co-creating and making sure that everyone's taken care of without that ego of saying also that, like, I'm the one that makes the decision. It's like
mhm,
I don't have to be the one. I have an idea what we need to do, but maybe we'll get some more buy-in if people listen,
mhm,
or we'll come up with an even better solution that I can't even see by myself.
mhm,
And that's
mhm,
really amazing. So it sounds like, to kind of maybe tie a bow on this, it sounds like self-care allowed you to step up into leadership as a kind of a broad category more in your
mhm,
life, in that, oh, I need to change this or I need to bring people on board instead of
mhm.
like plow through.
Right. And even having energy, I joke around as a mom and a pediatrician. There were times when I had, three kids under the age of 4 that I didn't have enough energy to enforce a timeout. And it
Mhm.
used to drive we had a live-in nanny at the time because of my call schedule, my husband's schedule, but it used to drive her crazy. But I didn't have the energy. There was nothing left.
Mhm.
Right? And so by doing the self-care, by saying it's not okay to go on 4 hours of sleep a night, like that's,
Yeah.
crazy. Um, of course, now I have more energy to sit and listen, to patiently wait for somebody to come around. I've waited 8 months at times to have a conversation that I needed to have with my boss, waiting for the right time. Right. And the old me would have been impatient. I don't have enough time for this. I'm going to do it on my time. And it's like, no, actually, I have enough capacity to not just look at my own plate in a selfish way, like when we're so overwhelmed and feel
Yeah.
like we're in survival mode, we can only look at our own plate. But when we're taking better care of ourselves, we can look up from our own plate and look around and say, oh my goodness, everyone around me is struggling like I'm struggling.
Mhm.
It's not all about me, right? And I have the energy and the bandwidth to then say, yes, I can address my own stuff. And at the same time, that doesn't prevent me from then helping others and listening to others and honoring them and where they're at. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. So,
Okay.
um, as we're talking about, self-care, personal development a little bit is also kind of tied in that. What are three like influences or concepts or topics that really have influenced how you think about self-care over the last like 5, 10 years?
hmm so most of the influences happened over the last 5 years because I really shifted my routine, my regular way of going about things. So prior to that, all of my learning had to do with medicine, continuing medical education. It was about learning new things for my leadership positions or in the medical office. And then I began listening to books on Audible because I was struggling with my relationships. And at a mastermind, I asked one of the leaders of the mastermind, who was a relationship expert, I said, I'm struggling at home and as a supervisor at work. What do you recommend? And he said, The Five Love Languages.
Mm.
And I'd heard of the book before. I'd actually gotten a copy of it as a wedding gift, probably what it was like 15 years before that. Never read it. I'm like, oh, me and my husband get along fine. I don't need this book. Little did I know I needed the book. And I'd also always told myself I'm a visual learner. I can't learn by auditory, but my stack of books was piling up on my bedside stand and I wasn't getting to any of them because I didn't take the time to read. And I thought, well, I'm spend some time in the car every day. So the very next day, I downloaded Audible. I downloaded the Five Love Languages for Teenagers. And within 3 weeks, I'd listened to the entire book. First entire book had listened to ever, and only a
Mhm.
handful of books, even though I used to be an avid reader, that I allowed myself to read during my medical career. And so then that started this continual, I always have at least one, if not two books that I'm listening to on Audible. So I get through a book about every 3 weeks. So now I've got 50 plus books that I've
Mhm.
listened to. And is it as good as reading, writing notes, reading the book itself? It's not, but it's better than nothing. And
Mhm.
so that has really helped me in they're almost all, personal development, positive psychology books. And so they give me so many tools to solve problems that I didn't have before because I've got all that knowledge in my head. So that self-directed learning through what I listen to and listening to what are other people listening to podcasts, listening to different influencers who are trying to make positive changes. And what I found is when you listen to, like lately, the messages in all the books have been all about mindset. So I listened to Limitless by Jim Quick, listen to High Five Habit by Mel Robbins, just listen to Good Morning, I Love You. And there's so many messages in there about our mindset and recognizing the power of our mindset, keeping us stuck or allowing us to break through to that next level. And really, how can I then help my own clients and my people I work with and my own family
Mhm.
shift their mindsets as well and take away some of those self imposed limits that they're placing on their life. So that's that again, self-directed learning and listening to the message. And sometimes you can listen to a message from a person like my CEO is a big runner. That's how she burns off stress. That's how she stays sharp. And so she kept harping on me, Erin, why aren't you running? Why aren't you exercising? Oh, I just went to the gym last night, had a great run on the treadmill. And I heard it
Mhm.
literally for years. And it wasn't until I heard Brendan Burchard talk about if you are going to be on your A game, you must do these things. and meditation was listed, stretching, sleeping, eating healthy, exercise, right? So I heard the message in a different manner. And so, and then sometimes you hear it repeated over and over again. And you're like,
Mhm.
okay, if all these smart people are saying the same thing, I better start listening. And so that's when I started prioritizing exercise, prioritizing meditation, which I think I picked up maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And that's just a regular part of my daily self-care, almost daily self-care. And so then just being open to what are the messages, recognizing that anybody, a child, an adult, a coworker, a friend, everybody has something to teach us. And how can we open up our mindset and open up avenues in order to learn what people have to teach us, strangers? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're listening, there's a lot of feedback the universe or whatever your beliefs are giving you if you just take a moment to receive it. So I love
Hmm.
that idea.
Yeah.
So
And that's how we connected,
yeah,
right?
100%.
I asked for help. You opened up a door of opportunity for me, and there was that connection. And then we chose to continue that connection. And when we're so busy,
Hmm.
that whole doing versus being, if we spend more time in the being, and
Hmm.
meditation's what helped me get there. I couldn't be quiet and fully present without meditation. When we spend more time, then we see those little magical moments opening up
Hmm.
over and over and over again. But when we're going at, 80 miles an hour, think about how blurry everything looks to you when you're going
Right.
that speed, 100 miles an hour, 180 miles an hour on a bullet train, right? Think about how blurry everything is versus what if I choose to slow down,
Hmm.
go at a slower pace at least part of the time. Think about how clear the flowers are when you're at a walking pace, a strolling pace,
Yeah.
how much clearer things become. And then you open up more avenues then for those little magical things to come into your life again, whether it's the universe, God, or whatever your beliefs are.
Hmm.
But we have to be looking for them and going slow enough and fully present enough to really recognize when they're there.
Yeah. It's super important.
Mhm.
And yeah, one of those weird skills that I've found in my coaching practice where it's always been a balance of creating those moments where you can see the opportunity and then take it versus, going too far the other way. And that's all you're doing is looking at the universe for opportunities,
Mm,
but
mhm,
you're going so slow, you can't move quick enough to then jump on it and do. So I've always, I am someone that deeply believes people need more reflection, those slow moments, and meditation in their lives.
mhm,
And I think the pandemic was this really weird kind of global thing where everyone was kind of forced to take a breath and realize,
mhm,
what are you doing? Do you even like what
mhm.
you're doing?
Yeah.
What do you want for your life? And that brighter, bigger future for yourself. So I think that's
Mhm,
so. Um, but those I always kind of bring that idea up when I of that balance because it's not something that I've seen. Um, so, okay. Anyways, I'm like trying to speak and then trying to think of the next question at the same time. So if you guys heard me kind of stumble there, that's just me trying to multitask unsuccessfully. So next question for you. If you're enjoying listening to this episode of the Meaningful Revolution podcast, there's another kind of conversation that you might really enjoy. So check out Dara here explaining a little bit about high performance coaching.
I feel like in this particular moment where all of us need massive amounts of self-care, high performance coaching is one of those huge gifts you could give to yourself for self-care. It's one of those things that just shapes your life in all these ways you never imagined. And I think I would just tell a friend that it's worth it. and get ready because it's going to shake up your life. Like, it almost feels like, you don't even realize as you're going along kind of these progressive steps, and all of a sudden, 12 sessions in or however many sessions in, you're like, wait a minute, I'm planning and thinking about a life that is, drastically different in many ways. And so it's almost like this mental shaking up and getting all the crap out of your head. So I think it's an amazing experience, and it's incredibly energizing, and it's worth every penny.
Awesome. I love having deep conversations with folks, whether they're in my podcast or in my coaching practice. And so if you'd like to have your meaningful revolution started through a conversation and high performance, please stay tuned to the end of this episode for your invitation on how to get started. If someone wanted to get started in self-care, so imagine it's someone that's super stressed out, has been going, 120 hours a week, not seeing their family, not taking care of themselves, has something come into their lives where they're like, okay, this needs to change for me. What would be like 2 or 3 things to just get started in taking care of yourself, like habits or actions to keep it kind of action focused?
So I think the people who tend to run their lives at that pace have very high expectations. And so one of the things is to get a new habit. If you lower the bar so low that it's going to be impossible to fail, do that. So for me, I meditate in my bed, and it solves 2 problems. Number 1, when the alarm goes off, I immediately turn on my Calm app and listen to 1 or 2. Now, it used to be 1, now it's regularly 2 meditations each morning before I even get out of my bed. And I no longer snooze. I used to snooze, and that wreaks havoc on our sleep. If you've ever read the Mel Robbins' other book, The 5-Second Rule, and talks about how snoozing really wreaks havoc on your sleep. So don't snooze. So it solves 2 problems. I get to stay in my nice warm bed for another 15 to 20 minutes, and I stopped snoozing. And then each day, by the time I get up out of bed, I've already gotten 1 healthy thing checked off. Does it have to be, to get the full benefits of meditation? They say it should be about 12 minutes a day, but even 2 minutes a day is better than 0 minutes. So what can you afford to do? Everybody can take probably 5 minutes out of their day, right? Carve that out and just add that one tiny little thing that's so easy to do, and you're not going to fail. You can, while you're driving to work, tapping is another thing that can really decrease anxiety, help us feel grounded. So every time you stop at a stoplight, you can just take your fingertips and tap on your chest, and doing things that are going to trigger your parasympathetics, because we live so much of our lives, a big percentage in our sympathetic adrenaline soaked time, and we're not spending enough time in our parasympathetics. And by triggering more parasympathetics throughout the day, we're going to improve the quality of our sleep, even if we don't increase the quantity of our sleep. So what are those easy things, right, that you can do that aren't going to add something to your day? So for me, I don't add 20 minutes of reading to my day. I listen to Audible while I'm driving. It's a win-win, right? You can listen to uplifting music in the shower, right? Doesn't add any time to your day, but now you've got a mood boost. If you like smelling things like citrus, or, for me, orange and citrusy are really happy smells. So I have essential oils, and I would have that in the shower, or get that started when I sit down in my office. So finding what the tiniest little something that's easy to do, impossible to fail at, and just do that first. And then once now maybe that 5 minutes of meditation, 5 extra minutes in bed, uplifting music, that's going to have a positive ripple effect, and you can use that momentum then to move you on to the next thing. And so maybe exercise. So now maybe you drink more water every day. And so you commit to drinking more water. How easy is that? Pretty easy. And so maybe exercise is a month or 2 down the road, but you've made do the easy things first to build that momentum. And then you might have better energy than to tackle the harder things.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think you're leading into my next question, which I always love to ask guests because it always gets them thinking. Is
Mhm.
after you get the basics done, maybe you're not a beginner anymore, you're in that intermediate space. Is it like, the 1 to 3 things to do? Is it like exercise, like the first one? And are there a couple more for people that have started and want to maybe up the quality of self care or
Yeah.
get to that next level?
Mhm. So I know for myself when I I'm fairly fit. I do a lot of walking. I move a lot, but unless I'm doing like getting my heart rate up and I'm doing like running, jogging, I joined a kickboxing gym. If I'm not doing that kind of activity 2 to 3 times a week, my brain's not going to function. I remember when I first joined this kickboxing gym and it's called 9 rounds. And so there's 9 different things you do for 3 minutes at a time with a 30-second break. And so by the ninth one, it's a 30-minute drop in workout, super easy, super fun, moving your body, lots of fun things to do. So makes your brain agile as well. And I remember sitting there with like one of those yoga balls, and I don't remember what the activity was. But I was on my back and I was staring at the ceiling. And I was like, oh my gosh, like my brain just exploded with all of these great ideas with my business.
Oh, nice.
And so, and I'd only gone to the gym like a handful of times. And that's all it took to then say so if you want to level it up, really figuring out for yourself, for me, I have to exercise. If I'm doing a big thing, like a big talk or a big something, I want to get some calisthenics in earlier in the day, like doing a jog or something. Um, so really paying attention to what works for you. And then, figuring out, getting outside in nature, right? Doing that. And then journaling, right? That's another big thing that not everybody takes advantage of. And journaling and then the reflection. I think you commented on that maybe earlier, is when I go back and I look at my notes that I've taken over the last 5 years with my coach, and I do that self reflection. And I was like, you know what? It's documented in my notes. It took me 6 weeks to break a habit that I had for 20 years of staying at the office too late.
Yeah.
6 weeks of coaching, and I was out the door hours earlier.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then I can also look and say, it took me 2 years to go to my first yoga class. Like I put it off that long, saying to my coach, I'm going to go to yoga, I'm going to go to yoga. And it
Yeah.
just didn't happen. Right. So taking that time to reflect so that you know what's working and what's not, where you're stuck and where you're making progress. Kind of what you don't measure, you can't change or you
Yeah.
can't get to the next level. And being okay with continuing to challenge yourself, right? If it's easy now and you're comfortable with what's going on, okay, level it up. Do you want to do a half marathon? Do you want to do a full marathon? What is it that you want to do? And then you do hard things and you're like, wow, I did that,
Yeah.
right? And how power, and then you're demonstrating to other people they could do it too if you can. Yeah.
I love that. And, you know, years ago, I signed up for a marathon, just,
Hmm.
not being able to run 15 minutes straight, signed up for Chicago Marathon. Um, and that thing you just said about people see you in action and get inspired. So it was my first job in tech, and probably about 3 months into training, I'd cut a bunch of weight, and I was feeling all the energy, all the good.
Hmm.
Every like you can get addicted to running. That runner's high is a real
Hmm.
thing, you know. But I had my whole team going out at lunch then to go run with me because they saw how impactful it was. It was super
Hmm.
strange, like seeing people in action like that. But I love that. So, get your heart rate going through kickboxing, through whatever is going to elevate your heart 2 to 3 times a week. I love that. Getting out in nature, I'm pulling out from what you just said, and then that journal reflection on tracking yourself, understanding how long it takes for you to do things or not do things, and why digging into why I think is that next level. At least when I talk to my folks, at my clients, where it's like, okay, it's like you didn't do this. That's
Hmm.
one thing to notice that. Then it's like that next step of like, and it's usually painful because people are avoiding something, but it's like,
Hmm.
why did you not go to yoga for two? I mean,
Hmm.
was it just life got busy and that's 100% okay? Or was it like you thought it was too weird or like,
Hmm. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Well, and I think too is that inaction is still a choice. It's still an action
yes.
when you choose not to do it.
Yeah.
And so when we own the things we don't do, as well as the things we do, it's like, oh, what was my excuse? It just was I didn't make time for it. I didn't schedule it, had an interest, and yet didn't prioritize it. So
Yes.
and was still overcommitted, right? So
Yeah.
it was surprising to me how, like, in this program that I've created, I call it shrink the plate, right? So I mean,
Hmm.
I think of us as having these ginormous plates filled to the brim, and there's just crap falling off all over the place, right? Because we just have overcommitted to way too many things.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many things you have to take off your plate in order for it to then be more reasonable so you can get to everything. So for me, like my visual cue is if I've done my laundry and I
Mhm.
don't put it away, I'm overcommitted.
Oh.
Because if I have the time to do the laundry and I put it
Mhm.
away, I finish the task 100%. That means I'm not so scatterbrained that I'm not finishing things and that I have enough bandwidth and time to finish my tasks. So that's something that helps give me a thing like, oh, Erin, what are you overcommitted on? How many new things are you doing? And what do you need to stop doing in order to get this back under control?
Yeah. That learning your self tells are such an important part of that reflection process. I'm
Mhm.
so glad you brought that up because that is, I love that it's like, oh, I didn't finish this thing that I do every week.
Mhm.
You know, that's telling me something is not balanced in my life. That's telling me to
Mhm.
really start paying attention. I love that.
And you're
Um,
going to pay the price no matter what. So like
yep.
we've had four different people on my husband's and my side of the family pass away in the last 4 years. We
Mhm.
inherited a lot of extra stuff. It's been in our garage, and we haven't, we needed to get over the emotional triggers and everything, but we're in a place where we can do it, but we haven't carved out the time. So now we're doing a big fundraiser for a breast cancer walk that me and my daughter and her boyfriend are doing next month in Chicago. And
Awesome.
so my husband has given us permission to have a fundraising garage sale. So guess what? I spent 10 to 12 hours in the garage 2 days in a row last weekend. Lots of fun. I call it procrastination pain because I didn't get to it an hour at a time throughout the last several years. So when we choose inaction, right, we're going to pay the price, or somebody's going
Yeah.
to pay that price at some point. And
Yeah.
can we learn to do a better job fitting it into our regular routine so it's not so painful when we finally get to that, because we've waited so long.
Yeah. It's getting me thinking about a lot of the things that I've been procrastinating on now that I
Uh-huh.
need to go and make sure I
Well,
journal on after this.
yeah. Well, and then the clutter, right? So part of
Yeah.
self care is, dealing with the clutter in our space, the clutter in our head, which can be negative thoughts,
Mhm.
right? So I think that we haven't talked about this a lot, but the power of our thoughts, right? We're with ourselves 24/7.
Yeah.
And so one of the best gifts we can give ourselves in self care is, what are you telling yourself? I had one client that shared that she was worried her daughter was going to inherit her traits because she struggles with anxiety. She's a worrier. And I was like, you know what? Your daughter would be blessed to get half of the traits you have. Like, you are
Mhm.
such an incredible human. I want you to see that like I see that. Right. And when
Wow.
you're
Yeah.
telling yourself, and there's this thing called the reticular activating system that the last few books I've listened to have all talked about it. And think about the hundreds of thousands of pieces of information that are coming into your brain every day.
Mhm.
And your brain has to filter it out, right? Can you imagine if you're driving down the road and your brain had to acknowledge every leaf on every tree you drove by and every spot on the side? Like, your brain has to filter. And so the reticular activating system trains you on what to let through that filter.
Mhm.
And so if you're telling yourself negative things, oh, I stink at organization, oh, I'm such a procrastinator, you're actually telling your brain, look for those things that tell you you
Yeah.
stink at this, look for those things. And so we need to rewrite the script in saying, I'm figuring out how to have less clutter.
Yeah.
I know how to figure things out. And so your brain starts looking for, I'm going to find those things that Erin's figuring out on decreasing clutter, right?
Yeah.
I stink at math. No, not really. Like, you have the ability to do math and you know how to get better at it.
Yeah.
And so and that's a huge thing, because think about the negative ripple effect
Mhm.
that we're creating in our life when we are so critical. And one of the things I ask my clients is, would you say those same things to your sister or your best friend?
Yeah.
Can you treat yourself more like you would your best friend, with that respect and that honor, whether it's self care or the language that you're using? And if you can't use better language with yourself, how are you going to role model that for your child that you're worried about?
Yeah.
And so it was, I think in one of the books I've just looked to, it talked about shut your mouth. You know how our parents might have said, shut your mouth if you've got curse words coming out of your mouth. But it's
Mhm.
actually, you hear that negative word come out of your mouth and you say, no, shut your mouth. Don't
Yep.
even let that come out. It's not true. And what really is true is this alternative.
Yeah. I like to describe it to my clients as like that scene in Indiana Jones where he's got like the sack of sand and the gold statue. And so what you want to do is swap out the bad thinking with something a
Hmm.
little bit more positive. So something like I hate my job is like I just don't love my job yet. And that little
Hmm.
shift in language, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
you'll be looking for reasons to love your job
Hmm.
because you just haven't figured it out yet versus looking at all the things that make it really terrible. So,
And I think that I've come to the realization, this is my theory anyway, you see couples who've divorced,
mhm,
and they went from loving couples that got along and saw good in each other to being total enemies. And all they can see is the negative.
yeah,
And so we have the ability to shift from good to bad, bad to good, right? The power of that reticular activating system in our brain as a filter, because we're telling it what to look for. And so if I look for every one of my spouse's negative traits because we're no longer a couple, that's exactly what I'm going to find. And
yeah,
so same thing when I'm hearing all of, sometimes of them, my daughter's struggling, whatever, and she's going to take it out on me. And I just hear every negative thing. And I say to her, I say, if that's all you're looking for, the negative things that I'm doing right now, there's positive things happening too, but you're missing them. You have to look for those. Or maybe it's with her brother, right? Because,
yeah,
so we have to look for those things in order to see them.
yep.
And a lot of times that takes practice if we're not used to looking for those things.
What habits keep you on purpose or on mission on promoting self-care and changing culture to be more accepting of self-care each day, each week, each month, or each over the year?
Mhm. I think the two biggest self-care habits that I've implemented over the last few years that have helped me be the most successful in maintaining self-care is increased sleep. I'm still not as good as I would like to be,
Mhm.
but I really realize how much sharper I am, how much clearer I think, how much more productivity I have when I get a full night's sleep. And so, for example, the last few nights, I have an alarm in my phone that's called sleep timer. So when I'm setting the alarm, it tells me how much sleep are you going to get if you go to bed right now.
Oh, cool.
And so when I'm setting it, so can I make it around 8 hours plus or minus? And then it tracks. You slept an hour and 15 minutes more than your average last week. So it helps keep me accountable, and by tracking how much I'm sleeping. And so the last few mornings, I've actually woken up on my own without, before the
Oh,
alarm goes off. So that
awesome.
tells me, hey, you're really stressed out, which wasn't the case, or you're doing a better job at getting enough sleep because you're waking up on your own timer. So that is really, really helpful. And then the other thing is the meditation. And I just find, when I meditate and I keep my cool the majority of the time, think about all the interactions, all the negative interactions I'm preventing.
Mhm.
For example, I had a conversation with my son a few weeks ago and I was calling him out. I think I was on vacation for 2 weeks. He was in charge of watering the plants and a lot of them died. And so I was just
Oh,
talking to
no.
him about, okay, so here's my expectations. And I was in a calm voice and I said, so tomorrow I'm going to have you help me cut back the plants. We're going to need to start watering them. We're going to see which ones we need to replace. And I'm going to ask you to be part of that because you were responsible for taking care of them. You had capacity and you chose not to do it. And his response was, why are you yelling at me? And I said, actually, honey, I'm not yelling. I'm just calmly, I said, I'm frustrated, absolutely, because I asked you to take care of this while I was gone and you didn't. I said, but actually I'm talking to you in a very calm manner. And he kind of went, oh, I guess you are, aren't you? But his his anger came up and he
Yeah.
was feeling that from himself and projecting it onto what he was seeing from me. But it really allowed me to, the old me premeditation would have really lashed out at him. And it's like,
Yeah.
he made a mistake. The plants aren't important to him, they're important to me. I feel like if I'm important to you, you're going to take care of my plants. But he's a teenager. He messed up. Okay. And so it really allows me the majority of the time to prevent those friction moments that are so easy, especially now, like mental health issues, people's stress levels, 2.5 years into the pandemic, and then it's just one more thing and one more thing, and all the politics and all the things. And people are just worn out
Yeah.
unless they're taking care of themselves. So I was so happy that I started working on my own stuff 3 years before the pandemic hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had my coach in my back pocket for years before the pandemic hit. So when I had people reaching out to me and their lives are falling apart and their marriages are falling apart, and they're like, oh my gosh, can we meet for coffee or something? Like, you seem to have it together better than some of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I still had a strong foundation to stand on, even though I had my own things going on.
Mm-hmm.
I had invested in myself. I'd created a life that had a buffer. So even when worst case scenario, like I said, losing my parents in 5 weeks' time, did I take a hit in my emotional and my ability to deal with things? Absolutely. But I went into there strong when that hit. And so I was able to see the beauty in, they weren't alone when they passed despite COVID. I mean, there were so many magical things about being able to be there for them when they passed that I look back and I say, thank goodness I feel blessed the way that happened. And yet, if I hadn't invested in myself and my own self-care, I wouldn't have been able to manage it like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those are the two biggest things, and then just strengthening my relationships because I've taken better care of myself. So my marriage is in a healthier place. My relationship with my kids is in a healthier place. I have friends when I used to not take time for friends. I have girlfriends and I do social things. And so I think that the social piece, I wrote about this not too long ago on one of my blogs, that the pandemic stole from us. Getting
Mm-hmm.
together regularly, hugging, touching people, physical contact, seeing people's smiles. Think
Right.
about that being gone from our lives for 2 years, that isolation. And so really seeing, with whatever we're comfortable with now, but that socializing, we're social creatures, even if we are an introvert, right? And
Yep.
we need that contact and we need to get together with people. And so that's one of the other things that I've chosen to do and not feeling guilty about it is I choose to be social. I choose to do things with my friends, even though it takes time away from my family, because I know that it's going to be good for my self care and it's going to be healthy. And then I can connect with other people. And if they're feeling stuck, I can role model for them healthier ways of doing things and encourage them. Oh, you haven't been out. Let's go get together. Yeah.
That's super great. So, Erin, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We covered a ton of ground. I took a bunch of notes myself. I'll have to go through after this to do my little recap for the audience. Before we let you go, where can the good folks reach out to you or follow up with you if they would love to learn a little bit more about self-care and the work that you do?
Mm-hmm. So I'm in a bit of transition right now. I do have a Facebook group that's called Transformational Doc, DOC, creating happier, healthier healers. And so it's primarily to support healthcare providers. It provides information about my upcoming events. I do wellness workshops and then also lead coaching and other retreats and things like that to support mostly healthcare providers. There we go. Okay. And then I also have a website that is it should be going live about now, and that's called thehappyhealthyhealer.com. and that has information on the different programs that I offer.
Awesome. I'll have those in the show note links below this episode for you folks in case you weren't able to write that down real quick. Erin, again, thank you so much. It's been such a great conversation. I felt like there's a lot of areas where we see eye to eye on taking care of ourselves, personal development, finding meaning in the relationships around us, and fueling that for living a great life. So again, thank you so much for your time, for being here.
Yeah, great to be here. Sounds great. Thank you so much.
All right, folks, we'll see you in the next episode. See you then. Take care. Before we wrap up this episode of the Meaningful Revolution podcast, I want to extend an invitation for you to start your meaningful revolution through a high-performance conversation. So if you go to seanbutler.com/coaching, you can qualify for a 1-hour strategy session with me as long as I have time. And we will deep dive and have a conversation like the one you just heard. So if you like this podcast and what you just listened to, then I know you're going to love our one-on-one strategy session, because we'll go in and we'll deep dive into your life through the high performance lens, this science-based process that people love, and we'll find some breakthroughs for you on how you can live a little bit more meaningful, or feeling a little bit more fulfilled, or feeling a little bit more connected to those around you. So, but don't take my word for it. Here's more of Dara sharing their story of how they were before and after certified high performance coaching. And again, if you're interested in qualifying for a free 1-hour strategy session, go to seanbutler.com/coaching, link below wherever you're watching or listening to this episode. So over to Dara.
Before coaching, I was just sort of like a machine, just going along and doing the thing, and like there were decisions that I must have made at different points along the way that seemed like small decisions, but they slowly added up to this life that didn't make sense to me anymore. And it just came crashing down, and I took a day off of work and was like, I can't do this. Like, this doesn't make sense to me, what I do in my daily life, how I'm living my life, how I'm not taking care of my body, and socially, like, just the whole picture was just kind of it just all felt wrong. And then I signed up to do the coaching, and I think it gave me this space to pause and reflect in a way that daily life doesn't always give us the structure to do that. And because you're paying money, you're making this investment, right? And so you're committing to it in a way that if I say, I'm going to journal every day about my hopes and dreams, it's not the same as sitting down with someone, having somebody hold you accountable and showing up and doing the work. So before, just sort of this machine moving along this path that was sort of unconsciously set. And then after, I've just shifted simple things like how I feed myself. And like just little things that I'm suddenly aware of, and who I bring into my life, and how I spend my time and energy. And it just feels so much more in alignment with my values and my goals and my community and family's values and goals. So huge change.
What an episode with Erin, and I think we can all agree that self-care is so important. So I hope again that you've taken lots of notes on this episode like I have, but I really think the very easy habits of doing a quick meditation each day, even just for 5 minutes, can really change how you feel about your day. I think that tapping and trying to get into your parasympathetic system to help you feel more grounded is another really quick hack that I know a lot of people in my coaching practice really love. Or just, listening to uplifting music or getting enough H2O. So all basic things in high performance to help us have a little bit more control of how we show up. Because ultimately self-care is helping you show up in the present. It's helping you do what you got to do to get ahead in your life. So with that, that's what I'm taking away, guys. I really hope, again, that you're thinking a little bit more about your self-care and how it can help you feel better during the day, or how it can help you relate better to the folks around you, or to make that bigger impact out in the world, because that's what we're all about. And at the end, if you are doing self-care and working on meaningful things, that's when the magic happens. That's when people change the world. So I believe that, and I hope you do too. Listen to our next episode. If you like this episode, share it with 3 folks that you think might enjoy it, and comment on Apple Podcasts, or join us in our community at community.seanbutler.com.